thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks Yanni for being here.
Of course. Hopefully, I don't embarrass you guys tonight.
We'll see, man. We'll see. And glad to finally try your
Cheers, man.
world-winning honey ale. So at the end of this, everyone will have a chance to ask Ian questions. I'm sure there'll be more questions than the ones that I have. But before we start, so I want to go back to when all of this started, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about the spark that initiated Engkanto. And let's go back to when you were working in the corporate world,
Yeah.
staring at containers all day,
Yeah.
and having a vision of just beer,
Yeah.
of beer.
I think the first word that pops to mind, which what was a spark, is Iraq, maybe. But just to give everyone a bit of background, previously to founding Engkanto, I worked in a family business. Not a very sexy business, container terminal operations. So I worked with a company called ICTSI for about 9 years after moving back from the US. And I had just finished a 3-year stint in Indonesia, overseeing their Jakarta operation. And my family was with me, lucky enough, and we had moved back to Manila. And at that point, I kind of wanted to start my own business already. I was toying with the idea. Funnily enough, me and some of my cousins, actually Sandros, who's here today, and another cousin, Tristan, had kind of looked at investing in another Philippine craft brewery because we all had day jobs, but we all loved craft beer. So we thought the next best thing would be to be able to invest in a craft brewery. But that didn't work out. And then I moved back home. And while toying with the idea of starting my own business, there was the potential of being assigned to Iraq to oversee the container terminal there. And when they're like, you can't bring your family, and then you have to stay for 2 months, and then you have 3 weeks off, but you can't leave the terminal at all because it's not safe to leave the grounds of the facility. I was like, maybe now's a good time to start a brewery. so that's when I decided to take the plunge and start the craft brewery. At that point, not knowing yet what it was going to be called. Yeah.
Okay, and I guess like in that process, you were thinking of how to be different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And behind the name Engkanto is a story.
Yeah.
Right. That makes the beer different from
Yeah.
other beers. Could you tell us more about?
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I love beer. I've loved beer for a long time. You've known this. That's
Yeah.
always been my drink of choice. And honestly, that makes the job a lot easier when you love what you do and you love what you make. But I think the main trigger was with ICTSI. What I loved about my time there, outside of working with my uncle and my cousin, and learning from them and learning from the style of operation and kind of work culture they had there, was that I saw a Philippine company take Philippine ingenuity and skill globally, and you saw kind of how people in those countries looked at us as a Filipino company, right? It wasn't just the Danes, it wasn't the Singaporeans or the Hong Kong groups that could build world-class container terminals. It was a Filipino company that was competing with the DP Worlds, the APMTs, the Hutchisons. And I saw how much, in what high regard, the globe held us Filipinos in, right? We're held in such a high regard all over the world. So I thought to myself, why is it when we manufacture things, as Filipinos, we always assume everything has to be imported to be premium? That's not true. We make a lot of great things. A lot of our furniture is sold to some of the best, most well-established furniture retailers in the world. Maguire's a great example. So why couldn't we do that with beer, right? Show the world that we could create a world-class beer in the Philippines. So that was kind of like the roots to why I wanted to, to start a company and kind of showcase what we could do at home as Filipinos, produce something that we could be proud of.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess so you came up with the name Engkanto because of the
Yeah.
folklore aspect, right?
Originally, it was meant to be Kanto Brewery, because I love the fact that, here, many times we drink and, growing up, we used
Yeah.
to just buy our beers in the gas station or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
sari-sari store and drink it anywhere we could. So the original direction was Kanto Brewery. But then I thought, roots in having our roots in Cebu, I love the story of Encanto being kind of like representative of the folklore, the belief in folklore, mysticism, our superstition, and Visayas being kind of the home to that superstition, right?
Yeah.
Everyone knows Sikihor is like the center of all mythical creatures in the Philippines. So I love the connection between Encanto and where I grew up, home, without being so stereotypical.
Yeah.
Because you saw a lot of brands that were using super stereotypical,
Okay.
yeah.
And we'll go back
Names.
to the branding
Yeah.
in a bit,
Yeah.
but there's an adjustment right
Yeah.
after COVID. But I guess in the early days, most people a lot of people have ideas, but to take it to reality is always the hard part. Like, so what was it like in the first few days of working for yourself?
Yeah.
What
I
did
mean,
you-
I think every entrepreneur will tell you that the biggest challenges are usually at the start. And I was blessed enough to have a lot of family and friends that also believed in my idea. But a lot of entrepreneurs literally give their blood, sweat, and tears and both pockets towards starting their own businesses and taking the risk, right? And I admire that. But I think the biggest challenge was I knew I love beer. I knew I wanted to manufacture beer. I had no idea how to make beer. So I think the first challenge was, okay, I'm not gonna attempt to put in all this money into building a manufacturing facility if I had no idea how to produce beer. So I actually traveled around the US with my dad, and we met really interesting craft breweries. We met the Billy Bush, who's from the family that started Anheuser-Busch. He started his own craft brewery after they sold Anheuser-Busch. We met with the owners of Anchor Brewing out of San Francisco. We met with the owners of Schlafly out of St. Louis and Harpoon out of Massachusetts. For those of you who are craft beer drinkers, a lot of those names should ring bells. And all of them had the same question. Where's the Philippines, right? And as much as I think what shocked most of them was that when we told them we are a country of almost 120 million people, a lot of them wouldn't believe us, right? And they'd ask that question over. So Philippines, but we don't know you, we've never heard, we're not familiar with the market, but you really have 120 million people. So I think size of the market intrigued them, but it was a market they didn't understand. So we fully understood the reasonings. So we ended up originally partnering with a small craft brewery out of Rhode Island that was very well recognized, called Proclamation Ale. And that was in 2016. And that led us to finally pull the trigger, start the company officially, and start our R&D process. Yeah.
Okay. And when you did start producing, I guess that was how many months or years after?
Yeah,
Because you started
almost a
with
year.
the brewery, right?
Yeah,
A year.
almost a year.
What made you convinced that Filipinos were open to trying new
Ready.
beer?
Yeah.
I mean, like, because you were aware that I'm sure that the incumbents had a dominant
Yeah.
position in the market,
Yeah.
right?
It's one of the markets globally where a single brewery or company has such a large control over the whole industry.
Yeah.
Right? I think the Philippines, San Miguel must have close to like 97, 98% of the
So
market.
did you guys know that you'd have to spend an unusual amount of money on marketing?
Yeah, our
before-
assumption was your assumption has to be every Filipino's basically grown up drinking San Miguel, which is the truth, including,
Yeah.
I mean, all of us, right?
Yeah,
Well, being from Cebu, it's just San Miguel and Tanduay, right? We love our sugar-based spirits there. But I think our assumption was, if we're gonna start a craft brewery and assuming that everyone has only been exposed to commercial beers, we should probably start creating beers that are super easy to transition to from a commercial beer. So I'm not gonna do super like a bitter, hoppy IPAs because the market will have a hard time, transitioning to it, accepting it. So how do we start with really high quality craft beers that are more Philippine palate centric. Because most of the local craft beers that existed at the time were doing American style beers. Your IPAs, your pale ales, double IPAs. So we wanted to kind of try to do something different.
Okay. So going back to the company itself, right? Besides, I guess, the story, the branding, what makes the beer better, right? In terms of when you say better quality,
Yeah.
what is it about the beer that makes it better than all the rest out there in the market?
I guess with beer, like any product, it's the person's taste, right?
Yeah.
With us, we love the fact that the Philippine population's average age is 25 years old or below. So you have a very young demographic that's super open to trying new things. So we thought, and you were seeing it with Philippine trends, right? The younger generations that were coming out of college, started working, weren't anymore thinking of, oh, how do I buy my first house or first car, or how do I start a family right away? They're like, I could enjoy my income, I could travel, I could, just rent a place, I could Uber or Grab, and we're putting their money more towards experiences. And we felt that craft beer, like any alcoholic beverage, is almost like you're selling an experience and not a product.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, no one talks about the lipstick they bought 10 years later, right? But everyone talks about that one time with their 5 friends when they got drunk and lost in the woods for like 5 hours and couldn't find each other. Those are the stories people love to tell. So which makes the job so much more fun, because we're selling an experience rather than just a product.
Yeah.
Right?
But is there like a single like factor in the brewing process that makes your beer different from, say, traditional
Commercial beers?
commercial beers? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the main difference is many countries have definitions, and like the US uses the number of liters you produce annually as a trigger for whether you're craft beer or not. But the true meaning of a craft beer is really the use of natural ingredients, right? You don't use any adjunct or replacement raw materials to substitute for your malt, your hops, your yeast, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, with craft breweries, you also incorporate other natural ingredients, like in our case, fruit, chocolate, coffee, but all the ingredients are natural. Because what happens is, if you remove a lot of the malt requirement from a beer, the malt is what gives you fermentable sugars. And fermentable sugars are needed to convert, are needed for the yeast to convert those sugars into alcohol. So if you replace the malt, what happens is you have to add a substitute sugar like dextrose to be able to hit your alcohol, your ABV targets. So that would be the major difference, that we stick to all natural ingredients when we produce our beers.
Okay. And I guess that gives you your edge. And I think I'm sure all of you have seen that Engkanto won the highest international award for craft beer, right? For the honey ale.
Yes, for the honey
right? So
ale.
I don't know if you're trying the honey ale over there. It's ranked #1 in the world now. And you beat 70 contenders from all over the world, first world and emerging markets, right? So yeah, congrats on that.
Thank you.
I think,
It was actually a surprise. The day before, they had announced to us the country winners.
and also Carlos Yulo, champion.
Yes, same time as, so while Carlos was bringing actual golds, we brought a brewing gold. But it was quite funny, because we had gotten the notice that we had won. We had submitted 6 beers, and we had won 3 gold and 3 silver for the Philippine category.
Okay.
So we were already super pumped. The team was super pumped and proud. And then the next day, they're like, "Oh yeah, and by the way, you won the global award for the flavored beer category for your honey ale." So that beat out basically breweries from all over the world.
Okay.
Yeah. So
But
that
you were contending. You were contending previously, the previous years,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So we've won the country award for several years for
Okay.
several of our beers.
For the country
For the
itself.
country.
Yeah, yeah.
But this was the first time that we won
Okay.
on the global level.
Did you expect that you would be in the top 10 or?
Well, you're not informed. That's the thing. So
Yeah.
you only find out after the fact. all the beers have been judged. So
Okay.
yeah, you have no idea whether you've made it to the global competition
Okay.
level. Yeah.
So this is perfect timing because you just started exporting your beer
Yeah.
to some of the biggest markets, the US, Australia,
Yeah. Dubai,
Europe,
Dubai.
Dubai.
So not yet Europe. U.S., Australia,
Australia.
Dubai, Taiwan,
Okay.
Hong Kong, Singapore, Thailand.
So did
for now.
this award help in any way? Like, did you see an uptick in demand?
Yeah, it's definitely gotten us attention. We get a lot of inquiries about the beer, and of course, a lot of the interest from, I'd say, from foreign markets is the beers that contain kind of exotic Philippine products. So the ube lager, I'm sure many of you have tried. It's purple, so it catches a lot of people's attention. The mango hazy IPA, the honey ale, and then we have a few specialties, but those are, I'd say, are the three core beers that we focus on exporting.
Okay. So I guess let's go back to the global expansion, right? Knowing that there's a certain level of competition abroad, how do you position yourself in foreign markets? So the U.S. is a very different market
Yeah.
from Australia. Do you have a strategy per market?
All are very different. The U.S., the way we've positioned ourselves there, we've started with California,
Yeah.
just because it's the biggest Philippine population in the U.S. 1.8 million Filipinos live there. So we thought Southern California, highest density of Filipinos in the U.S., would be the best place to start.
Okay.
And it's been a great start there. But each country, so if you look at almost any, people don't realize this. The U.S., for example, the number one selling beer now is Modelo. It's not an American beer; it's a Mexican beer. And I think a big reason for that is its exoticness, right? The fact that it's, Corona's done a great job, for example, with the lime in the beer. They've kind of owned that kind of feel. So now you have a Mexican brand that's number one, surpassed Bud Light. It's still very impressive. So kind of how we position ourselves there is that we also want to sell or pitch Filipino ingredients in our beers, because there aren't many Filipino beers available in the U.S. And unfortunately, you don't get great. Obviously, I'm biased, but we produce the best mangoes in the world. So when you have like a mango beer from the Philippines, people are very keen to try it because they also know that we're very well known for our mangoes. Yeah,
Okay.
and that's the same in Thailand, in Dubai, in Australia. Yeah.
Okay. And so what's the? So you're in about 5 markets now, or
Seven.
7 markets.
Seven,
Okay.
yeah. And looking to expand to 2 more.
And what's the end goal? Do you want to be in like all markets or?
I think for us, the main market is still the Philippines because
Yeah.
we really want to introduce high quality beers to the whole Filipino market. But it takes time. It's about education. So like when people ask, who are your main craft beer competitors? We actually don't look at the other craft breweries as competitors. We look at them as friends and partners, right? Because the idea is all of us as a community have to educate the market on the difference between craft beers and commercial beers. What makes us special versus commercial beers? And the nice thing is each craft brewery kind of has their own personality, their own character. Some focus on really hoppy American style beers. Some, like in Bauhinia and Cebu, focuses on only lagers and pilsners. For us, we like to incorporate a lot of local ingredients. So each one has their personality, and we work together.
Yeah.
So we get together, like this past Saturday, we had a competition amongst the industry, amongst the local craft breweries, and it was judged by the members of the community, and it was fun to have everyone together competing, but yet having a great time together.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we see
I
ourselves.
guess it's similar to other industries, right? Like specialty
Yeah.
industries like coffee,
Is the
wine.
same wine. Yeah. Yeah.
and I guess
Spirits, even spirits, right?
We have a
small
huge
community.
population about the middle class,
Yeah.
right? And I guess when you look at for investors and investors in the room,
Yeah.
curious about this industry, like could you give us a sense of kind of the market size of craft beer and
So in the Philippines, it's super small. I'd say outside of the 2 big Philippine commercial breweries, all the imported beers and all the craft beers combined is 1% or less of the market. So that includes your Stellas, your Coronas, your Sapporos, and all the craft beers. So there's still a lot of potential for growth in the market, right? And the way it works is that the initial drink of most populations is local spirits because it's a value for money play. So what happens is, how do you compete? Like a bottle of rum or brandy or gin is less than $2 for a 750 ml, and you're good for a week. For beers, right, you need like, well, when you're younger, maybe 12, 15 to get a really good buzz. But with spirits, you just need one 750 ml bottle, and that's good for even you and a friend for a really good night. So the way the market works is local spirits, local beer, then you move up the ladder, right? Wine being the highest level of the pyramid. And in the case of universally, with a few countries as outliers, there's actually an inflection point. GDP per capita of $4,000 or higher, and there's a drastic increase in the sale of beer because people start to move from local spirits to beer. But that's not going to be from local spirits like GSM and Tanduay to Engkanto, right? It's going to be that to San Miguel. But again, as the market grows, people start to move up the ladder much faster.
Okay.
So our assumption was that we're taking people that are moving from commercial beers into something of higher quality, right? Where it becomes quality over quantity.
So would you say you would compete in a way with like the foreign beer brands?
That would probably be the closest competition.
Okay.
From a price perspective and from a perception perspective. Because much of the market doesn't realize that Stella and San Miguel are the same thing. Heineken and San Miguel are the same thing. There's no difference. Maybe Stella does a better job at presenting themselves as premium, exact same kind of beer. Yeah.
Okay. And this is, I guess, a question about trends and like certain demographics, right? I was reading recently that the Gen Zs have lessened their consumption of beer globally. It's like a global trend. In fact, they have hashtags now called sober curious, where it's cool to be sober, right? And it's like apparently it's reduced in record numbers. I don't know if that's true. I read it in Forbes a few days ago. So, with that in mind, have you thought of well, number one is how do you navigate through that trend, and number two, have you ever thought of the non-alcoholic products?
Yeah.
Right,
Great question.
Category,
I mean, if you look at the US, for example, the fastest growing craft brewery there is a brewery called Athletic Brewing. It's a non-alcoholic beer manufacturer. And they're growing, I think, over 100% or more year on year. And they make incredible beers. They taste just like the IPAs you like, the pale ales you like, but it's non-alcoholic. I think, in a sense, we're lucky. This sounds terrible, but the Western market is much more aware of like the health benefits of not drinking. Here, we're not as progressive in regards to like our health awareness, and so I think there's still a lot of room for like alcoholic beverages to grow here. But it is something we've considered, of course, because one, you see the trends, and two, the fact that you can have an option. And I'm not saying out of our 10 beers, 5 will be non-alcoholic. You could have 9 of your 10 SKUs being alcoholic, and you could still have one that's non-alcoholic that caters to that market. But there are a lot of people, and it's even the younger, like the age that we would have started drinking, and now the kids don't drink as much, or they drink very light drinks, like Smirnoff Mule and Tanduay Ice and things like that. Yeah.
And do you see the trends of liquor being similar to beer in that regard? Like, local rum brands that go foreign, for example, like, and the gin, the local gin, I forget the name, Arc. So Arc's already in Europe, right? So they must be facing the same hurdles, right? With the
same challenges and competition, right? The great thing about Don Papa when they started was rum was a very, very small category. And the only countries that produced rum were Dominican Republic, Caribbean, Venezuela, and Don Papa was the first kind of premium rum brand to come out of the Central South American region.
Okay.
So it was a huge hit, particularly in Europe and the US. So they did very well. But it depends on the spirit type, the type of beer, what market you're in. Certain markets, beer's still growing. Certain markets, it's kind of stagnating, but certain pockets within the industry are still growing. So it really depends where you are.
Yeah, because it's interesting. You see, I mean, the most recent was Don Papa, right?
Yeah.
Their exit. I think they're sold for something like 400
Yeah,
or
400, I think
400.
280 or 270 million upfront, and then there's a 100
Yeah,
plus
earn-out.
like KPI driven.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you're seeing the success in other liquors. So
Yeah.
I guess it's even tequila, for example, right? So
you have like Distillery of Barako, which does the ube liquor,
Yeah.
which is doing really well. Arc is everywhere as well. So you have, and with spirits, the advantage is more stable, right? So it's easier to export spirits, more temperature stable, doesn't require cold chain. Um, but if you look at, people always ask me, why didn't you start a spirits brand? Why did you choose to start a brewery rather than a distillery? And my answer is always the same. It's that if you look at the Philippines, you take GSM, Tanduay, Emperador combined, and it's half of what San Miguel Brewery does.
Yeah,
Bottom
yeah.
line. So obviously the beer business is good here. It's just being able to find your market, right? Find your niche. Our goal is not to compete. We're not aiming to have 50% market share, 60%
Yeah.
market share. We understand that we grow as the market grows, and we're okay with that.
Okay. And I guess the second question about the non-alcoholic, do you see potential in that?
Definitely.
Okay.
I mean, you see, Ricardo and I got to attend a conference in the US a few months ago, and it was incredible. One thing that I envy about markets like the United States is you could be a beer manufacturer without spending a cent on capex, because you could toll. So you have a lot of toll and contract brewers there that build facilities purely for other people to brew with them. So as opposed to here, where since there's no toll manufacturers, we have to spend all the money in building out the facilities to start our business. But you have great brands in the States, like I'm sure many of you have heard of like Papi, which is the healthy soft drink. Papi, you have Beatbox, which is like a tetra alcoholic wine cooler. And they're doing 200 million, 250 million sales in like 5 years without spending a cent on manufacturing. So it's a nice advantage that markets like the US have that we don't have. Actually, most countries in the world don't have that advantage. But markets like Europe, the US, Japan, Australia, these opportunities exist. So all you need sometimes is a great brand, a great recipe, and an idea, and you could start up, where your focus is purely on marketing, really.
Yeah.
Here, you have to do it all. You have to focus on building your facility. You have to focus on executing. So it's very different. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess I guess this question relates to how you monetize in the future, or how you benefit from this ownership of Engkanto. Like, what is the end goal? Do you plan to keep this company forever? Do you?
I'd love to.
Like seeing some of your investors here, I'm sure they.
I mean, my kids have told me we'd love to work with you. I mean, that's still a long ways away. They're still young, but if there's an opportunity for them, I'd love to own this. I guess I've been lucky enough to grow up being surrounded by two families that have always been focused on long-term
Yeah.
business building, right? So I would never look at it as what's my first opportunity to exit.
Yeah.
I'd love to build this long term. I'd love to pass it on if I can.
Yeah.
So our focus now is just grow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so going to that, I guess going to the philosophical side of things, like, what is your business philosophy? General.
I mean, to us, stay true to ourselves and always try to deliver an incredible product or service to the market, right? We'll never sacrifice the quality of our products because we believe that's what makes us who we are. And beer is also meant to be fun, right? So culturally as a business, we try to have a fun working culture where we don't take ourselves too seriously. I mean, at the end of the day, beer represents fun. And I'm honestly lucky to be surrounded by a team that's much smarter than I am. So that helps a lot, right? And I could rely on them, and we see the momentum. Like, we see the momentum, the market starting to move, and our assumption was, okay, how you're gonna get people from commercial to social craft beer drinkers, and then from social to permanent craft beer drinkers. And we're starting to already see with some of the market, people moving from commercial to craft beer permanently, where a lot of people can't even, a lot of like friends of mine can't even drink commercial beers anymore. They probably hate me for it because it costs them more, but, and that's kind of what we want to see. It's people move to us as a permanent beer
Okay.
rather than just a social beer, right?
Okay. Yeah,
That's the biggest challenge.
actually, that is a good question, right? Like, pricing
Yes.
is such an important. I guess I'll have the crowd ask their own questions after. I don't want to take your question, but it's an interesting
A very,
point,
very,
right?
very
Because,
great point. Especially in the Philippine market, right? I always joke with people where Philippines is the only market where the A market of the Philippines loves Target more than anyone, right? You'll never see a member of the A market of Russia
or Costco.
or Saudi Arabia or India shopping in Target in the States, right? But Filipinos, you go no matter what segment of the market you are, Filipino families go to the States for 2 weeks and they're in Target 7 days of those 14, you know? In the same Target. It's not even a different Target. So we're a super price sensitive market and we know that. And a lot of the feedback we've gotten from customers is related to price. So it is a great question.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask a few more questions, and then I'm going to leave it to the floor.
Yeah.
I'm sure people have questions here. But the last few questions are more personal, right? Wanted to ask, like, are there any business leaders that you look up to the most, especially as you were building your career, getting into the, building Engkanto, right? Are there any that have kind of shaped the way you think as a founder, as a leader?
I think
right?
quite a lot. I mean, locally, obviously, like growing up, seeing like my dad and his cousins grow the family business together, and not just themselves, but with their parents' generation. It was always fun to see growing up that kind of like atmosphere of unity and enjoying building a family business together. My uncle, who I worked with, my mom's brother and cousin, I learned so much from them. And if it weren't for my 9 years in ICTSI, I don't think I'd be as comfortable starting my own business. So I learned a lot from them, and I loved kind of the decentralized style they had, where like each region had their autonomy, and it was just don't screw up, right? Like you screw up, you're gonna be held accountable. Don't screw up and just hit your targets, hit your KPIs, and you're fine. I love that. And then of course, globally, there's so many. Buffett, Li Ka-shing, Hong Kong, built his business from nothing, gained the trust of HSBC, who sold him his stake in Hutchison Whampoa, which is what propelled him. Guys like all the tech guys, Bill Gates, Bezos. Actually, for those guys, I actually admire them more for what they did after they built their businesses than what they did during the time they built their businesses, right? Putting money back into the community. Coke, the Koch brothers.
Yeah.
I mean, Bernard Arnault, LVMH, unbelievable. So when it goes back to like the question on price, right? Price is always an issue. But if you look at the greatest brands, LVMH, Chanel, Apple, they completely ignored lower pricing. They went for the top of the market, and now those are some of the most valuable companies in the world, right? So it says something. Sometimes, yes, it's good to cater to a very wide market, but sometimes if you have the best product at a higher segment of a market, there's also a huge opportunity there.
Which goes against what Henry Ford said, right?
Yeah, that everything should be...
You feed the masses,
Yes.
dine with the masses, dine with the classes, right?
Yeah. So both work, right?
Yeah. So you're also an angel investor. We invest in many things together with your dad. He's here in the room. And you started investing together with me, actually. We started 2018, 2019. I wanted to ask, has that experience in investing shaped the way you think as an operator, or vice versa? Because it has with me, right? And I love asking this question because it's a completely different
me too.
approach, right?
Me too. I think, well, one, I've had a great time, right? Investing with you and Juan, me and my dad. And the part I love about it most is learning from the founders and management teams of these companies. Because again, like I said earlier, a lot of them are smarter than I am. So every time I sit with them, I talk to them, I learn things that I could incorporate then into my businesses. And one of the things I've kind of realized is that the best thing that happened to me from a professional standpoint is realizing I wasn't cut out to manage the business I founded. I was not an operator. I enjoy more of the marketing side, more of the sales side. I wasn't a manager. And luckily enough that we found a great manager to lead the business. So now I just help them. Now I'm like the gopher, messenger of the company.
Yeah.
So and that a lot of that like realization came from also
Which is a leadership trait.
hearing
Realizing that you don't have.
yeah, and it,
Yeah.
I thought it would be a tough lesson, but it was actually to me super relieving.
Yeah.
Realizing that I couldn't do it and finding the right people that could. And I learned that from my time investing with other companies and seeing what they were doing as well,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Actually, Doug Leone of Sequoia,
Yeah.
someone asked him to rank his top companies, and the top two,
Yeah.
he said the common denominator of the top founders were the ones who are willing to give up operational duties.
Yeah.
So
Day to day.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Like some of them don't have that operational. They're good founders,
Yeah,
but they're not.
and visionaries, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're humble enough to be like.
Yeah, Bill Gates with Ballmer,
Yeah.
Page and Brin with Eric Schmidt. So you see it quite a lot, right? And even the Waltons, after the father passed away, and another family I admire deeply, passed it on to professionals, right? So now they have no family members running the business.
Yeah. So one more question, I guess, and then everyone, leave it to the floor. So there's one piece of advice you could give to students or early entrepreneurs in the room. What would it be? One or two pieces
guess-
of good advice.
I guess embrace failure. It's the best way to learn. And God knows we've had a lot of it at Engkanto, right? From decisions I made in the beginning when we were building the facility and I didn't fully know what I was doing, to kind of later realizing, oh, should I have done this before? I mean, it's not worth regretting mistakes because those are the best ways to learn. And it's always easier said than done, right? Because most people, when they're starting their own businesses, like I mentioned earlier, they're putting everything into it, right? And risking a lot. And that's what I admire most about entrepreneurs. Most developed countries are built on entrepreneurs. People that take risks, start their own companies. And I admire that. So I'd say, yeah, the best lesson is, embrace failure and also don't be scared to admit mistakes, right? Whenever a founder says it's smooth sailing, I've had smooth sailing all my career, it's a lie. Okay, no businessman or woman has had a perfect journey. Everyone makes mistakes. So yeah, own up to it and allow other people to learn from you and to learn from those mistakes as well.